Good afternoon, and welcome to the Global Connectivity PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll, and I'd now like to hand you over to Keith Harris, Chairman. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And thank you very much, Alessandro, for arranging this. I'd like to give you a couple of minutes of introduction just to tell you how I got to where I am in this company today. And the journey started actually for me in the early 1980s when I was introduced to a cable TV company in the United States in an industry sector that was just beginning to get going. I did a number of equity raises, convertible bond raises, some merger and acquisition work for a small company in a suburb of Philadelphia called Bala Cynwyd. That company is called Comcast Corporation. Today, it's capitalized at $180 billion. It trades 18 million shares a day. And the first transaction I did for it was raising $22.5 million in a euro convertible bond offering, 22.5 million versus 180 today in 1982. The reason I refer to that is that there are many similarities between that company and the types of challenge and opportunities that there are for the rural broadband business that I'm involved in with Global Connectivity. Homes passed, penetration, churn, all the same issues that are faced. So that's that background. I've been an investment banker for most of my working career, effectively bringing that to an end 10 years ago when I took up a more principal role. During that period, I've been chief executive of HSBC's investment bank, where I had a role as the chairman of its private equity business, as well as running the investment bank. So there was a combination of both being an intermediary, an advisor, and a principal. And the same applies to this company. Global Connectivity today, of which I'm the chairman, started life as a reverse takeover into a company called South African Properties, almost irrelevant, except that it came to my attention when the original founder of that business passed away very suddenly in January 2020. I have a home in Scotland, and in that home, I'd just come back from a Christmas here where the remarkable quiet of the Scottish rural countryside was matched by the fact that the phone didn't ring and Wi-Fi didn't communicate. And the reason for that is that there was no broadband and there was very little Wi-Fi connection, and certainly no cell phone. You come back into Signal and the phone, of course, goes ding, 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 ding. And you realize that what you're living in is a quiet, peaceful bubble, but the rest of the world is getting on. So with that in mind, when I was invited by one of my board members, Selwyn Lewis, to take over the running of this company, it was very much in mind that I had that, my goodness me, I live in a rural landscape in Scotland and metropolitan London. And whilst in London you could communicate, whilst in Scotland you couldn't. And then in doing some research into other parts of the United Kingdom, what I found essentially was that 80% of the United Kingdom is designated as rural, and it houses 20% of the population, or 12 million people. So it was an issue. And the reverse that I refer to was a company called SWS, founded and operating in fixed wireless access provision of signal in rural parts of Shropshire. I liked the guy very much. We got on very well, and we shook hands with a deal. As it happened, a few days before COVID, stop being just one of those things that you thought was just another blip from China, like the flu, avian flu, and everything else, to being a very serious consideration. And then we went, of course, into lockdown. And during that period, we decided that we would press ahead. A number of us, me certainly very much included, got used to Zoom. The company's founder, Chris New, and I did a number of presentations over the Zoom to raise the money that we needed to take this company public. And that was in October 2020, so barely 3 years ago. And since then, we've moved forward with some pace in a very changing landscape. And Alessandro, if you could just reflect now, we've got the first, you should all have, I think, the first slide on your screens. And what I'd like to touch on here is that from that first initial public offering, October 2020, we built the foundations of a business that had ambition and a target. And that was to provide as much as we possibly could to the rural population of Shropshire initially, a very rural county, with a broadband service that provided fast, interrupting, and without question, the best form of communication that people could have. Little did we know, I think at that time, that working at home, living and working in the same environment, an exodus of people leaving metropolitan areas for rural domains would actually increase the pace of the demand for this type of communication. It did indeed develop at a significant pace and to a large extent. And what we found was, my goodness me, nationwide, fast and reliable broadband was challenging the needs of people, because without it, they couldn't communicate. And it reminded me to the late 1990s, when mobile phones suddenly became the vogue. If you all remember those great bricks that started with. And of course, the cost here, what we're contemplating is, and a lot of people have signed up to it, is a communication method which costs no more than your normal telephone bill, but actually produces a much wider and hopefully more reliable means of communication, both Wi-Fi, broadband, fast phones, heaven knows, the whole gamut, so that people working at home, suddenly children being educated when they couldn't go to school, people playing games in the evening, mothers and fathers working together at home, all demanding communications. So we found ourselves positioned in a sector that promised high growth, and what we realized pretty early on, with the government introducing the opportunity to receive voucher payments for up to a total of £5 billion, with 2 billion or so initially awarded to encourage the growth of this service in rural areas, that we were in the midst of a rush to get to market quickly, and a business that was capital intensive. So we went in search of an infrastructure partner. This was beyond the reach of a company, somewhat constrained by capital, and also constrained by the fact that what we sensed was that there was a rush to get this service out, both within Shropshire and within the wider UK, and we had to do it quickly, and we had to respond to consumer demand. That led us into the very fortunate relationship we formed with Tiger Infrastructure Partners. That transaction was announced about 2 years after we went public, so a year ago. So during that period, of course, we'd grown, mainly through fixed wireless access that SWS and another company we acquired called Cadence, which is a software business, were perfecting. We needed we needed to get to the market quickly. I can't say that often enough. So we created a deal with Tiger whereby we sold effectively 85% of our 2 operating companies, Cadence and SWS, to Tiger for an injection of capital into those businesses up to £75 million, which they were committed to spend £16 million in their first year of ownership, just coming up now, October the 25th, the deal was signed. So in consideration for that, we received cash and we retained 15% ownership of the combined operating companies. They went into a company called Rural Broadband Holdings Limited, and that 15% is protected from dilution unless Tiger spends more than £75 million in capital developing our business. So the takeaway from that is that GCON, the company that has been renamed post the next deal I'm going to talk about, is a publicly listed company, and as far as I'm aware, the only one that gives access to this exciting market opportunity in terms of public ownership. So if we go on to the next slide, this is the transaction that is absolutely transformative. The consolidation in these markets seems to be destined to be fast, and it seems to be furious, and it seems to be very large scale. We had an ambition to service 5,000 homes in our original company. We already had 1,700, rising to 2,000 fixed wireless people, but the way of building this business was clearly in fibre. And so from June or so of this year, working together with Tiger and Macquarie, had a partner, Israel Infrastructure Fund, we were working on a transaction whereby the businesses would be merged. During the course of that, of course, the world had changed. The appetite for capital spend was affected by, amongst other things, inevitably, conditions in the world's capital markets and food markets, all sorts of markets, by the war raging in Ukraine. And we were looking at how to grow the business even more quickly when we realized that interest rates were having their significant impact, because a lot of the other providers of the broadband service, known as altnets, not competing because everyone had their own area, but were suffering. Some of these were suffering because the capital they were taking in was in the form of debt. Ours is largely equity with a smidgen of fixed interest capital to leverage the return, but it was conservatively financed. Some of those other altnets began to suffer, and one of them was Broadway. They'd been promised, with conditions, a pretty significant investment by their funder. It wasn't going as well, and we managed to acquire that business at the same time for a simultaneous closing, September, just last month, to create this business, which we call Vonius. Vonius is the name that Macquarie had chosen for the development of its infrastructure investment in broadband. They entered that market in 2019, so they were ahead of the game in terms of building out. Tiger, of course, only entered it in 2022. The interesting thing for me in this is several. One is that we're combining with one of the most highly respected infrastructure funders in the world, in Macquarie. Tiger's infrastructure business also has a very, very high rating. So we had 2 excellent businesses, and maybe fortuitously, maybe by plan, I don't know which, to be honest, the 3 companies that came together, Macquarie's business, Vonius, our business, and Broadway, We're all in adjacent geographic areas, Shropshire, Staffordshire, and East Wales. The optimism for developing this sector led to a forecast that we would be reaching as a combined business 350,000 premises in hard to reach communities throughout the UK, with a very strong anchor base in Shropshire. So as we move on to the next slide, by having these properties in the same area, we're able to develop very strong benefits. The principal ones are a large pipeline on our doorstep. So we can plot and plan, and already in our first month of operation, we're seeing the benefit of that. We have economies of scale, cost scale. We're a large entity, according to Macquarie, the largest rural broadband supplier in the country, which means that we have a strong negotiating position with the contractors that will be installing the fibre for us. And of course, in a capital intensive business, as one builds a utility, we have strong capital backing financially from institutional shareholders. It will enable us to lead and roll out on an accelerated basis our services. The benefit for GCON is very straightforward. We are not required to put our hands in our pockets to participate in the capital build. So we have no financial commitment to participate in this. We are a 15% shareholder. There's a slide at the end which will make this clearer, but if I can use these words to start with, as £250 million is committed, some of that is from a banking group led by Lloyds and Daiwa. The rest is coming from the three major shareholders, Tiger, Macquarie, and Israel Infrastructure Fund. GCON is not a participant in that, but it does retain its shareholding in the entity which Tiger owns. I'll come on more to that. The initial contribution of Macquarie and Tiger to the combined company, which will be known as Vonius, branded as such, will be that Macquarie's leadership in terms of being in the business for 3 years longer makes them the largest shareholder, and the way that Tiger's ownership stake in the combined business will increase will be by disproportionately funding the capital needs over the next. It's impossible to say exactly how long, but I know one of the questions I think will be, how long will this go on for? But if we say for the next 15 months until the end of 2024, by that stage, one expects the capital required to build to the business size that we've suggested will be such that the ownership share of Vonius will be if not 50-50, will be certainly much narrower than it starts with. And you'll see that the initial stake that Tiger has in that business is 32%. That is actually a new figure. The deal that was first struck had a lower percentage ownership, and the first funding round has already taken place. And as a result of that, the percentage ownership of Vonius has increased in favour of Tiger. Just to repeat, we at GCON has protection from dilution until and unless Tiger spends more than £75 million in capital. So if we can go to the future developments, there were some options here. I'm not used to being a passive investor. And indeed, as we developed this business, we came across a number of interesting, I called them allied businesses in the fibre space. What we've achieved here is an anchoring of our investment in the fibre broadband market. We're in partnership with very, very strong financially capitalized partners. We are not constrained, however, in how we can develop our business, providing we don't seek to compete. You do not seek to compete with Goliath very often and come out like David. So we're very happy to have that very friendly relationship. I've been invited and accepted that invitation to join the board of Vonius. There will be 4 members from the Tiger side, 4 members from the Macquarie side. And I think there's a question about conflicts of interest, which I'll deal with later, perhaps. What we are looking at doing is, with that anchoring and what we think is a very highly valued equity base for us, is that we have been looking at and saying no to opportunities to develop in allied fields. There are several that we have been focusing on. We've dismissed 3 now, and we are looking closely at fulfilling what we set out to do, and what I've said in many chairman statements and RNS releases, that for the company that, as I said, and I think it's worth repeating this, we are the only publicly quoted company in the UK engaged in the ownership of this type of entity. We're focused on communication, technology, and broadband connectivity. And the businesses that we're looking at either acquiring or merging with or investing in are companies that are somewhat involved in that. I can't be too precise. I will maybe say a bit more if people are interested at this stage, but these are not deals that are about to break. All deals take a while. Due diligence has been underway in looking at a number of them. And you can expect that we will develop our business into an operating company with a strong ownership percentage in this broadband business that I've already described. So if we go on to the last slide, and I realize that when someone's been working on something for a long while, it comes as second nature to think this is very simple. I also realize that actually describing it to other people for the first time, it can be quite complicated. If I can run through this, you'll see that the top left-hand corner, the ownership that I referred to, 15% GCON, 85% Tiger, is through a company, Rural Broadband Solutions Holdings Limited. That is the company that has contributed to Vonius Limited, Cadence Networks and Secure Web Services, SWS. On the right-hand side, the Macquarie and Israel Infrastructure Fund own 100% of a company they have called Vonius Investment Holdings Limited, and that's the company that owns and operates their broadband service businesses, as I said, in adjacent areas to us. Those companies, Vonius Investment Holdings and Rural Broadband Solutions, combine to own Vonius Limited. And you'll see the reference varying percentages. To repeat, the Rural Broadband Solutions Holdings Limited is currently running at 32%. That will increase as they fund more of the capital needs of Vonius Limited over the months to come. And the varying percentage is obviously the reciprocal. So if it's 32% for this side of the business, is 68%. And they go into Vonius Limited. The ownership thereafter, as daughters of Vonius Limited, is 100% of Cadence, Secure Web Services, and the other businesses already owned by Macquarie through Vonius. The branding for all the services will be under the name of Vonius. It's catchy, it's strong, it's got a good reputation, and we're very happy to be part of that family. As we develop, the businesses will merge into one. That is already underway, and a period has been given, a sensible period of time. It won't be elapsed time, it'll be productive time to create a complete business. Some of the uncertainties is how much eventually will be invested in this company. The initial is up to £250 million. What we believe may well happen as we move towards consolidation of the sector is that other acquisition opportunities will come up, as did Broadway. Broadway was acquired out of administration. It was therefore it was a great opportunity not to be missed, bearing in mind it was also in an adjacent geographic area. We suspect that others will present themselves, and what better company than to present themselves to than ours. So I'm not going to use any of the type of language that are used on adverts when the future's bright, the future's orange. But what I can say is that we think we have an excellent starting point, a foundation built from strong foundations, like all good buildings should, a very high quality management team in Vonius, which currently exists. It will be enhanced, particularly in the technology area, where the acquisition of Cadence brought some very, very, very high quality individuals with strong technology backgrounds and have transformed the way that connectivity can operate in this company, in this country. I can leave it at that. If everyone's satisfied that gives at least an introduction, and very happy to take questions.
Perfect, Keith. Thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right corner of your screen. We have received a number of questions from investors, and I want to start off the Q&A session with these. The first one reads as follows. When/how will Global Connectivity's investment in RBSHL be realised?
Okay, so I think the easiest way to answer that is to tell you that I made it perfectly clear. We are in partnership with private equity companies. They make their returns, which tend to be very high. Private equity groups make their returns by investing, and then exiting. It is not like a public company that can run for a very long while. They manage money on behalf of other people. They are set guidelines whereby they're expected to make a return on the capital invested in a given period of time. In this industry, we are expecting to see consolidation. There are large players that so far have concentrated their efforts on metropolitan areas. Some of them are having big issues. Anyone living in urban centres will notice that travelling around is no longer as easy as it might have been. The roads are being dug up, forever dug up, and that's the installation of fibre. For them to look at broadening their appeal to customers and going into rural areas, as I said at the start, that's 80% of the country. It's still 20% of the population. And to fulfill the government's objectives of losing a digital divide, that will be an important part of the overall platform for just as mobile phones are now. Huge penetration. In our case, we have very low churn. We have very high penetration. So we think it's an attractive opportunity for those companies. You'll know them. They drip off the tongue: BT, Openreach, Virgin, Liberty Media, and there are others. So we would expect to be part of a consolidation discussion, and that could start as early as the first quarter of 2025. If there is an exit, which would be either a sale, partial sale of this entity of Vonius, we will benefit directly as a shareholder in that company. That is one potential exit. The other is that what we are finding is that the number of homes passed, particularly in villages and small towns in rural districts, it's word of mouth that does the selling for you. In a rural community in Scotland where our house is, I think there are 14 houses and 13 of them are connected to fibre. And that means that as one goes through the process of passing a house, the house then becomes regarded as ready for service, i.e. the house is passed, communications to take fibre into the house are ready, and then they become paying customers. If that increases at the pace that we're anticipating, this is a business that will generate high cash flow. And I'm not talking about the GCON's side investments, I'm talking about the core business. And if that is the case, then there's every likelihood that the breadth of potential acquirers, investors in this business will be much greater. There are pension funds, long-term investment funds in the United Kingdom, which manage our pension monies, our life insurance monies, that I think, when I say this is not just me thinking, that there will be opportunities for those companies seeking a good yield. And utilities, if you bear in mind, once the costs are sunk in creating the business, it's then a question of managing the business well to create strong yields on those assets. And that would be, we think, an attractive opportunity for that type of investment fund to acquire this type of business.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I know you have just touched on it, but there's almost two parts to the next question. Was there an option to sell GCON's holding to another investor as part of this round? And if not, what is the return target the board is expecting?
Okay. In the documents that we agreed when we first did a deal with Tiger, we were not permitted to sell our shares for a period. Didn't bother me. We thought we were in partnership with a very strong ally, and so that's been the case. So we're very happy, extremely happy actually, to be in partnership, first of all with Tiger and secondly with Macquarie. We are looking currently at being a 15% owner in a business which it looks as though will grow to become nearly a 50% owner in the operating business of Vonius. So we can all do our maths. So our sale, our realization is likely to come through the capital appreciation as that business develops. I can be a little bit more explicit, but I'd sooner see if there are other questions first.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question here. GCON compromises the board of Keith, Mike and Selwyn as non-execs and Keith as executive chair. Do you see your roles as a conflict as you are on the board of Vonius? Will you look to change the board structure at GCON as exec chair isn't great from a corporate governance perspective?
Okay. So as I said, we're looking to develop GCON. This will not be a passive investor and no more than that. So as we have discussions with would-be acquirees or investee companies that will be in a different sector, that will inevitably open doors for a broadening of the board of company, the board of GCON. In Mike Langeland, we have a totally independent director. In the case of Selwyn, we also have an independent director, notwithstanding the fact that he's also an investor. Me joining the board of Vonius is, I think, in our discussions, I think is seen as keeping tabs on the business. So it means that I'm absolutely in touch with the development of the company. And until and unless any particular conflicts develop, I don't think we see anything other than this being good for GCON rather than anything to be contested. And please bear in mind that when I was chief executive of a very major investment bank, we had lots of businesses that ran somewhat together occasionally, but somewhat apart. And the job of the chief executive was to make sure that the conflicts of interest that could arise were managed. And that will be the case here as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question here reads as follows. Is GCON looking at taking other minority investments, or will GCON return to an operating company whereby they are 100% in control?
Okay, so they're really extremes. I think the likelihood of us taking a minority investment would only be as a stepping stone to acquiring full control. We have that flexibility. If a company presents itself, which means that we do a transaction to acquire and integrate an acquiree directly into GCON, then that's something that we would certainly also look at. It depends entirely on the company in question and the circumstances. So we're not ruling out any, but the important message is we will be an operating company. We will not just be a minor investor in other businesses.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Keith. The next question here. What could RBSHL represent in bonus if Tiger funds the group disproportionately, as in 32% currently? 32% currently. What could RBSHL become of the group?
Okay, so this is maths. This is maths. So if 30 in round terms, if 32% grew to 50%, then if we suffer no dilution, then we would obviously be 7.5% of the whole. That's the simple maths. Now there are lots of hurdles to overcome on the way. In my own mind, I take a discount to that. There are some subtractions to be made. There's the cost of capital. There is the possibility that the business could grow much greater if a huge acquisition was presented to us. That would be examined on its merits, obviously, and we would certainly look at that. I think as things stand at the moment, I'm working off GCON having a share of somewhere, and I'm trying to be conservative. And these are on my own assumptions. I have no special knowledge here. I'm working off a lower percentage, just to be conservative, because when we get on to thinking about the valuation that this business could grow to, the numbers are very substantial.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question here, can you give an example of what a technically based business is?
Well, I mentioned Cadence. So Cadence is a very good example. So technology is in the case of communications is a process by which two parties are connected. It's as simple as that. It can be consumer to consumer. It can be business to consumer. It's to do with speed. It's to do with cost efficiency, and any business that applies technical solutions to achieving that end is, in our mind, a technical business. I'm not a technical person particularly. I enjoy working with people who have technical knowledge, and I think I've got a decent understanding of it. But when I listen to the opportunities that there are to improve, to speed up, and like the rest of us, I guess, still I'm amazed at how those bricks that we used to use as communication devices have now shrunk to something that goes into the pocket, but produces so much more capacity and depth, can do so much more. I think that's what we're focusing on. Anything that is allied to the improvement of communications in this sector, fiber, communication. They're the two buzzwords for me. The words such as gigabit, compliant, and various other things, I think are secondary. The crucial elements are fiber and getting the fiber into the premises to avoid some of the issues that a number of you will have. Buffering on streaming television, if somebody else is using their telephone to communicate on the internet. So the internet is the background, fiber is the way, and communication skills, the improvement of communication skills go hand in glove with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question here: when are you targeting making an investment from GCon into something, and how many such transactions are you targeting a year?
Okay, so I touched on the fact that yes, we are targeting investments. Yes, we are underway in looking at opportunities. There were steps to overcome, so we haven't been able to advance. So this transaction, the whole relationship with Tiger, which transformed the nature of our business, meant that these things were all being considered. There is due diligence to be done. It depends. I think I don't want to forecast that within the next 3 months we will have closed something. It's possible, but certainly during the next 6 months, by the end of the first quarter of 2024, it would be as likely as I can possibly predict in an unpredictable world that we will have made an investment. Is it possible we'll have made 2? Well, doing 2 M&A deals with investment at the same time is a big challenge. Not out of the question, but a big challenge. Doing 1 is something that we, as I said, we are certainly capable of contemplating and achieving.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next question asks, what news flow can investors expect moving forwards?
Okay, so to an extent on the broadband front, we're going to be reliant on information flowing into us. As I said, I'm on the board. We're a shareholder. The communication that I've witnessed to date within the larger family is strong. How much of that will go into the public domain, I don't know. There will be some competitive elements at play here. But I'm a great believer in communicating when I can. I'm always equally a believer in not communicating for the sake of it. When we hit targets that are set, the outside world will know about it. When we have, I haven't touched on vouchers because the whole voucher issue is another possible strand of revenue source for this company. No doubt there will be communications. What I can say is that as I get information which is cleared for dissemination to the public market, it will happen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next question here reads as follows: is the competitive landscape shifting with the Starlink satellite connectivity gaining traction?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. The next question's a bit longer, so do bear with. What is the realistic valuation per home passed? I understand that the range is between £2,500 and £5,000, per home passed and more than double that for homes connected. This would imply a valuation of circa 1 billion plus for Vonius, assuming a target of 350,000 homes, and circa 70 million pounds for GCon's holding, which would be circa 20 pence per share, if you had any comments on that.
That's a very fine question, considering it was an analysis. I wouldn't take issue at any of that. When we were doing the deal with Tiger, we employed, this is as Rural Broadband Holdings at the time, we employed the services of Analysys Mason, one of the highly regarded analysts of this sector. And so we used a number of their valuation metrics. And I should say that the cost of passing a house varies enormously. So we can only take an average, because in some rural communities, you'll find a row of houses, 15 houses, and it's pretty inexpensive to pass those homes. But to the extent that way leaves are granted, there may be farmland with homes dotted on them. They're obviously more expensive, but still not to be disregarded. Analysys Mason had figures around the £4,000 a home passed kind of level. That's pretty plumb in the middle of the range that are granted there. It's hard for me to disagree with that analysis. I don't know who Chris is, but compliments to him or her.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Keith. I think you've addressed all those questions from investors. And of course, the company will review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Keith, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Alessandro. When we talk about technology, I'm delighted to say that it works. It's worked perfectly. The fibre into the house that I benefit from in Scotland gives me much more reliable, fast broadband and Wi-Fi than in London. I think that's a strong message. Anybody living in rural communities, working in rural communities, working from home will benefit massively from if they haven't got it. As I said earlier, the word of mouth is a very strong one. In smaller communities, rural communities tend to be as such. It's important that they know that their neighbours who have taken the plunge, and it's, by the way, it is not disruptive. It truly isn't disruptive. It is not expensive. It's also it's a service that people can pay more and get faster results, faster connectivity. If they take somewhere in the middle, it will be no more expensive than their average phone bill. I believe this is a utility that has fast become as important as the railroads were in the railways, sorry, not in America. The railways were in the late 1800s, as mobile phones were 30 years ago and more. And I think increasingly people will realize that the ability to communicate via methods such as Zoom and Teams become not just good to have, but an essential to have. The ability to communicate across the globe with relatives, with friends, in business, massively important. And I think it's got a great future. I'm delighted to be in partnership with wonderful partners, strong management team. And I'm very proud to be the chairman of the only public company through which investors on a small scale can get access to that growth and that promising future.
Perfect. And Keith, thank you once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that Keith and the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will then take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Global Connectivity PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.